Congressman Ellison's list of achievements could quite literally fill the next half an hour, but I don't want to hear my own voice. I'm sure you don't want to hear from me. We all want to hear from Congressman Ellison, so I'm going to give you the very abridged version of his bio. And I'm going to start with perhaps the most important thing about him is that he was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. All the rest is just icing on the cake. Having moved to Minnesota to study law, he, of course, he now represents Minnesota's 5th congressional district, which includes Minneapolis and the surrounding area, in the U.S. House of Representatives. Previously, a community activist, a civil rights, employment, and criminal defense lawyer, and a 2-term state representative, his guiding philosophy is based on both generosity and inclusion. He is a member of the House Financial Services Committee. He serves on the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. In the past, he's served on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, and I am quite exhausted, so I'm going to stop there and let him speak. Welcome, Congressman Ellison.
Not only was I born in Detroit, at the age of 19 when I took Shahada, it was administered to me by that awesome brother right there, Abdullah Bey El Amin. Stand up, my brother. A birth of another kind, right? Well, thank you all for having me here. I just want to say in the most strenuous terms I know how that I really appreciate ISPU and the wonderful work that they do. Dahlia, thanks for that wonderful presentation. Was that not awesome? I mean, I think it was great. If you're a policymaker or an activist or just a citizen who wants to know what's going on, this is excellent information. And there's another document on your table, and I really want to urge you to read the executive summary because it talks about the next step beyond the research a little bit. It talks about how you can take the research that we have and apply it to make a meaningful difference in the lives of your community, and I think it's really important. Now, tonight's theme is strengthening our democracy, amplifying American Muslim voices. Is that the theme tonight? That's the theme. Strengthening our democracy, amplifying American Muslim voices. That is the theme tonight. And I hope you know that by trying to amplify your voice, you just started to mess with some people. Seriously, because you know, don't you, that the anti-Muslim haters are active specifically because you are trying to amplify your voice. These people fear you amplifying your voice, which is why they're so vociferous in their antagonism. They want you to shut up, keep quiet, don't talk back. They want you to suffer passively. They want you to submit to them. But we only submit to God. So we can't do that. If you doubt it, let me just tell you, this is a nonpartisan event. Nobody's endorsing anybody around here, but Donald Trump and Ted Cruz have had their views out there in the public sphere recently. And Ted Cruz hired a man named Frank Gaffney, who is a top advisor. Do you know who he is? He is a top advisor to Ted Cruz, hired on the campaign, and he said this: we should define the problem as the hateful doctrine of Sharia and the Islamic supremacists who are determined to ensure that the entire world submits to it. If not thwarted, the successful imposition of Sharia will achieve the end to which those who hate us, Muslims, aspire: our destruction as a free nation. For the record, I do not hate Frank Gaffney or anyone else, and I suspect neither do you. But he defines his struggle as such, which is important to understand because you may wonder, where's all this negativity coming from? It's coming from a well-financed, highly orchestrated group of people who have put money, resources in order to not allow you to amplify your voice. And this is important to know, and I hope it doesn't discourage you, because despite their efforts, your voice has been getting out there pretty good. I want to let you know, I was in Salt Lake City last night. Now, if I told you I talked to people in the Church of the Latter-day Saints, you'd say, well, that makes sense. There's a lot of folks like that out there. But let me tell you, I talked to the Democratic Party of Utah. And when they had their opening prayer, as is their custom to do, they had one person offer the prayer. And that person was a Muslim imam who made an Arabic language Quranic recitation and then translated it into English to the applause of everyone. I'm telling you, this is going on all over the country. It's going on in South Carolina, Oklahoma, all up and down the West Coast, California, Oregon, everywhere. It's going on in the South. It's going on in the East. The Muslim community, I can tell you, is getting its voice out there. So now you might think, wow, they're saying these nasty things, they're saying those bad things, they're saying all these things, but I want to assure you that you have every reason to be confident, every reason to continue and intensify your activism, every reason to get more involved and to recruit people to be more involved, because it is our engagement and our involvement that is really going to turn things around. Now, you might think, well, why do they fear us? We're not doing anything. We love this country. We participate. We start businesses here. We open up clinics here. We participate in every aspect of American life. We're police officers. We're firefighters. We died at 9/11 with the rest of our fellow Americans in New York. A fact. We're represented in the U.S. military. In fact, my son, a proud Muslim, is a medic in the United States Army active duty right this second. And so, what's the problem? Why do they fear us? Well, because they fear you might question the status quo. They fear that you will say, wait a minute, this is the richest country in the history of the world. Why can't everybody who needs one go to the doctor? Americans who are Muslim are starting clinics all the time. Let me tell you a little quick story about when I was in Ferguson. So I was in Ferguson shortly after, about 2 months after Mike Brown was shot and killed. And as you know, Mike Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson, and there were riots, burnings of stores, things like that. It was a bad scene. When he was killed, there was only 12% of the people of Ferguson who voted at all. So when I came there, I came in anticipation of the election in order to increase the voter turnout. While there, I went into an African-American church with a Baptist minister. And in that church, there was a clinic. And the name of that clinic was the Salam Clinic. The Salam Clinic. And in that church, you had an African-American pastor teaming up with some Muslim Pakistani doctors who were seeing patients all day long and were setting up another one in St. Louis. And I said to them, congratulations, guys. This is awesome what you're doing. It's great that in response to this riot that you set up this clinic. They said, oh, no, we've been doing this for 3 years. Catching people doing things right. Now, you can't go to this African-American preacher and tell him something bad about Muslims, because what he knows is that his congregation and people in his neighborhood had unattended diabetes, and now they have people who are looking after them. And some of those people are named Ahmed, Mohammed, Samir, and even John and Larry and Sam and Rachel and Mary. You understand what I mean? And this is not just happening. You all know about the Ummah Clinic in Los Angeles. You know about the Iman Clinic in Chicago. You know about the clinic across the street from the Muslim Center. What's the name of the clinic? Y'all know. It's so funny. Everybody says all at one time. Bam. There's more than 30 of these clinics, but I didn't anticipate finding one in this place that needed someone to care about the health needs of that community. You're questioning the status quo. You might question a system that piles debt on top of students and families at exorbitant interest rates, while those same lenders are borrowing from the Fed discount window for almost nothing. You might say that ain't right. You might question the government that calls bigoted hearings on whether or not Muslim Americans are doing enough to combat radicalization, while shutting down a branch of the Department of Homeland Security that looks at domestic right-wing extremism. Did you know that happened? Happened. You might question the status quo about U.S. foreign policy. People are fearful of this. You might question whether the U.S., our country, should always prioritize stability over democracy. You might question whether exclusive and unquestioned support for the most extremist elements in the Israeli government is a good idea. You might say, is that a good idea? Should we be doing that? I ask this question as an American. You might ask yourself whether Palestinians' rights should be ignored and whether every petty dictator sitting on an oil reserve should get our unquestioned support. You might ask that question. You might not, but you might. The fact is, you might ask, you might say, when people are seeing their rights violated and taken away, you might say that the United States, which stands as a beacon of democracy, should say something about it, whether or not we have large business interests there. The sad fact is that America, our country, which we love and are honored to be a part of, is not a perfect country in its policy. No country in the world is or ever has been. So don't fault us for not being perfect, because nobody ever has been. But as we love this country and strive to make it a better place, we might question the subtle expectations of some who've been relying on things being the same way for a long time. So your voice, which you are trying to amplify and which you are bringing forth right now, is something which makes some people uncomfortable. But you have to raise your voice anyway. You have to raise your voice anyway. So this is why you see some people, with foundations and donors, which have provided more than $57 million to organizations and experts that orchestrate misinformation about Islam. Their goal is to dominate the airwaves with the patently false idea that Islam is a violent religion. You have to use your personal example, your activity, your work to counteract that and be a living example of the peace embodied in the Muslim faith. So I think your theme tonight is exciting, and it's bold, and it's even a little daring, right? And I think that it is an excellent place to start. Now, let me tell you this. The first thing to do before we talk about any kind of tactical or strategic moves is to be Muslim. And what I mean by that is that there is no choice to be made between being a Muslim and being a member of a democratic society. It's really kind of a ridiculous choice to ask anybody to make, your religion or your national origin, where we're both at the same time. Just like we're both male and African American at the same time, or we're both female and Pakistani at the same time. We are both Muslim and we are American all at once. And there's no contradiction. And the fact is that once we embrace that as a fact, we can say that we don't have to sacrifice who we are. We don't have to put our identity as Muslims under some sort of a shroud or hold back or pull back. We should stand on the core values which animate our faith. We should embrace the core values like justice, and we should therefore fight for reforming the criminal justice system. We should embrace diversity that is so richly apparent in this room. Just like the Sahaba were so diverse. They were Africans, they were Persians, they were Europeans, they were from the Indian subcontinent, they were Arab, but they were united in the only way that really, really matters. They all believed that there's none worthy of worship besides Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. That's what united them. That's what bound them together. So all those other differences didn't matter. It didn't matter that Ali was just a kid, just a young person. It didn't matter that Abu Bakr was a wealthy businessman. It didn't matter whether you were male or female. What mattered is that you are part of this tremendous mission. We should embrace that diversity, and we should work hard to learn more about each other. I dream of a day when every mosque in America is having Egyptian night. And everybody, whether you're African American or Afghan or background or Latin American, sits there and listens to our brothers and sisters on their cultural heritage. And then we switch it. And then everybody the next week has to listen to the African American experience. Everybody has to come and listen. Then we switch it. We're all going to stop and we're going to listen to what does it mean to be a Muslim in India? What are the culture? What are the food? What do you do? What's your history? If we did this, we would be a living embodiment of that verse in the Quran, O humanity, we made you from a single pair, male and female, made you into nations and tribes so that you would know each other. How well are we doing at knowing each other? Are we doing good at that? Could we do better at that? Would we respect and appreciate each other more if we worked on that? We would actually have this anthropology class that would allow us to learn so much more about ourselves. We also would be a stronger community for it. We are the most diverse religious group in the nation, as Dalia Mugahid just shared with us. Is this going to be a barrier to Muslims amplifying our voice? Or is it going to be a source of unity and strength? I think the answer to that question is it's up to us. But let's start with centering ourselves in who we are. We need so be Muslim. The next thing is we must organize the Muslim vote. At this time, I will tell you that as the first person ever to go to Congress who's Muslim, we have not organized the Muslim vote. We simply haven't done it. We haven't digitized it. We haven't put it together in a way where we can count on turning out the vote in a way that is reliable. We need to get out voter guides in every community. There needs to be a group of people who take upon themselves getting that information. We need to digitize the Muslim vote in order to enable leaders to communicate, inform, and guide Muslim voters, no matter where he or she lives. We also need PAC support in every local community, and we need to have voter registration drives in every mosque, every cafe, every Muslim center, every MSA. If you are a member of an MSA and you don't have a Muslim voter drive, then you're not doing all you could do. If you have a mosque and you don't have a voter registration table every Jummah where you're signing up people, I don't care who you vote for, then you're leaving money on the table. You could be doing that. 60%, we should look at that as a challenge. Don't you think so? I think so. We need to engage policymakers at all levels. Let me start by saying too many people think the game is at the federal government. It's not. The game is at local and the state level mostly. Let me say this. Nobody in the Congress can vote for, can set up qualifications for voters. That is decided at the state level. Nobody in Congress can draw the lines that I run in my district. That's a state level. Nobody in Congress can vote against these Sharia law bills that get introduced at the state level. The state is very important. And as Muslims go and have Hill Day, and I'm so glad we had a very successful Muslim Day on the Hill. My brother Imam Dawood was there. Where's he at? I don't know where he was here. We had a very successful Hill Day in Washington, D.C., more than any other participants. We had about 300 people. But the real movement has got to be aimed at Lansing, St. Paul, Minnesota, Sacramento, California, Tallahassee, Florida. We have got to be engaged there. We've also got to be constantly thinking about proposals to talk to legislators about. When we hit the Hill, I recommend that we have a Hill Day in every single state and in Puerto Rico, Marshall Islands, all of them. And when we get there, we come up with at least one thing that benefits the Muslim community and at least two things that benefit the general welfare, healthcare, education, all kinds of things like that. I think you need to know we need to educate our policymakers. If they don't understand you, how are they going to unless we engage them? I think it's critically important. As a matter of fact, last week we also had an Arab American Institute briefing which was incredibly well attended. And then finally, when it comes to engaging policymakers, we can't forget the importance of our courts. So much activity that guides what happens with Muslims and all human rights generally is in the courts. And let's not forget the court of public opinion. When Donald Trump was making such an ugly showing last December, we took out a full-page ad in Minnesota that said it would be so un-Minnesotan to not speak up when anti-Muslim hate messages were being spewed out. We got CEOs from every major corporation in Minnesota to stand there and say, this is not acceptable, and we renounce it. And I'm talking about people at General Mills, Best Buy, Medtronic. If you did a full-page ad here in Detroit, and you may have done one for all I know, it only cost us about $19,000, and we got over 28 stories about the full-page ad. Now, you're not going to get rid of the haters, but I like the idea that if somebody is an entry-level staffer at some company in Detroit, they got to worry about the CEO saying that we don't approve of that. You create a cultural environment, something we can do now. Now, let me also say, we have to tell the story. You know, there's a Muslim story about migration and immigration. Have you ever seen a movie about one? Who in here is going to write it? We got to stop telling our kids that the only legitimate job is to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Being a filmmaker is a good job too. Being an artist. We've got to. What about the musical tradition of the Muslim community? I'm from Minnesota. Prince passed away last week. Everything's purple all over Minnesota. Now think about this cultural impact of Yusuf Islam, Yasin Bey, Brother Ali. We need more Muslim musicians singing good songs that are uplifting and make us feel inspired. We need to have more Muslims who are engaging in the cultural drive to help make all Americans understand the rich contributions that we make every single day. These are artistic, these are in the media, these are in film, and we should encourage our children to go into it. I want to recommend a podcast. It's called Diffuse Congruence. It's with Zeki Hassan and Parvez Ahmed. I listen to it all the time. It's about Muslims in contemporary life in the United States. Has anybody ever heard of Diffuse Congruence before? 1, 2, 3, 4. Diffuse Congruence, you can subscribe on iTunes. And while you're at it, you should subscribe to my podcast, which is called We the Podcast with Keith Ellison. Also subscribe on iTunes. But we need people writing books like Ibu Patel and Reza Aslan and Dalia Mugahid. We need people writing books. How many Muslim authors do we have in the room tonight? If you wrote a book, put your hand up. You wrote one. 1, 2, 3. We need more. 4, 5, 6. We need more Muslim columnists. Who can write a column on a weekly basis? Who can write a column? We've got to get the message out there. So as I said, there is a lot we must do. But if we stand on who we are, if we organize the Muslim vote, if we turn that vote out in a reliable way, if we then will tell our own story, and if we will engage policymakers, you will see dramatic and important progress over the next few years, inshallah. But it's going to require all of us to throw in. People often ask me, and I'm going to wrap up, people often ask me, Keith, what can we do about the image the image problem Muslims are having? You can't solve it overnight, but you can solve it drip, drip, drip every day. Which raindrop caused the flood? All of them. We need you to participate and to make communication your own personal responsibility. You have a Twitter account, you have a Facebook account. We've got to push this message out, and everybody has to play in this game. So let me just say, it has been one of the great moments of my life. I'm so blessed to be able to serve community as a public official. And I say that not because I care about having this job, but because it has allowed me to speak up on behalf of some of the finest people I've ever had the pleasure to know. One of them I want to tell you about is a young man who I never had a chance to meet, but I got a chance to meet his mother. And his mother was a young lady who had tried to raise her son's name up after he was killed in 9/11. He was a 23-year-old young fellow, and he was a first responder, and he gave everything. And I was due to give remarks in front of the Homeland Security Committee that Peter King had convened about Muslim radicalization. And so I read my comments to this young man, to some friends of mine who had gathered on the phone with me to give me some feedback about the comments the night before. And they told me, you better call his mom because she is going to be in the audience tomorrow, and she might be upset if you invoke her son's name and she doesn't know you're going to do that. So I called her. What started out as a 5-minute conversation ended up being about a 25-member conversation as this mother tenderly talked about her son and how he loved Star Wars so much that he put Young Jedi on the back of his car on the license plate, how he wore number 79 in his football uniform, and how proud he was of that, and how he wanted to be this first responder and was able to do that. And when 9/11 happened and people were running out of that building, this young man was running into that building to save people's lives, and he gave his life in that pursuit. And getting to meet this young man's family was a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous blessing to me, so much so that I'll never forget the heroism, the courage, and the love and the dedication and the patriotism that this American Muslim family gave to this nation. And if you think about it, I know that you have some people in mind who inspire you as well. Well, these people are our neighbors, and these people are our friends. And people ask me, Keith, why when you were talking about this did you get overcome with tears? Because let me tell you, I'm kind of a tough guy. I don't really get too broke up very often. And I didn't know why, but as I reflected upon it, one thing came to me, which is these dignified, brave, courageous people, and having to hear all these stories of indignity that they had to suffer through just so they could make a meaningful contribution to this great nation. So I hope that you dig down deep and think about all these folks who have animated and shaped your life, because it is for them that you fight for and you move forward on in your work. Thanks a lot.